So we're here to solve this hexagonal star battle by Joseph Howard. It was themed for our hex week with this HEX shape in the grid, which we put in light gray for thematic purposes. I'm going to turn on shading just because I want to do some other coloring for solving purposes. You know, a lot of solvers will recognize the star puzzle like this, where we've got a region like this one in green that completes a diagonal row. The two stars in green will mean there are no more stars down here, but there are other spaces in this grid that have that kind of thinking of the star, particularly down here in blue. There are going to be stars around these two vertices and also stars around these two cell groups that will complete all of the bottom two rows. There are 4 stars marked in the bottom 2 rows right now. And that means over here on the lower right side, this region has sure stars placed where we just marked them. That means around this X region, there's 1 star in one of these 2 cells, and there's a star in the single cell that remains that's not yet marked. That means around these 3 cells, the stars have to fully separate, come to a pattern like this. If we come back and now again, like think about our counts in different directions, look at a lower left to upper right diagonal that's sort of going across, you know, these spaces marked in purple. I've got 4 stars already in the grid, 2 for sure and 2 with notation. So this cell, which is in that space, can't be a 5th star. This cell in that space can't be a 5th star. And so we actually complete this top region as well using that space. So different sets of ways you can think about regions and colors together to get key counts. Another place that was available to start to think like that was coming down here. In yellow is a maximum of 1 star. In this region in green are going to be 2 stars, and that means in this last space there can be a maximum of 1 star. Actually, it's exactly 1 star based on the constraints in the grid, which means that the other star in that region has to be outside that set of 2 diagonals. And a way to think about that is anytime you have a region that's pushing 1 star into a space of 2 diagonals, another region has to put a star outside. So 1 in here means 1 out up top, and we get this pattern and the star placed. Last place we could at the start of this puzzle use sort of star thinking through regions is actually, I think, in the top 2 rows. We've looked at a lot of sets of 2 rows together, so let's look at the top 2 rows. We can get 1 star in blue, 1 star in red. We've actually placed what that star is, but we always have to put 2 stars in this area in green. And what that means is everything else in this big region is not a star. And so another thing you could have done at the start was mark all of these cells out because the stars had to be up top in that green space. A star here marks off these cells, and we don't know more for sure yet about what's going on in the space around it, but this looks like a very good beginning. This is now a space where probably looking diagonally and seeing where we've got some almost complete spaces, like this diagonal looks to be complete. So we can mark those off. This diagonal here, actually, if I mark it in, is going to need to get a total of 2 stars. 1 could be up top, but that means 1 is down here in yellow. So I'm interested now in looking in this E region and seeing how do I place the remaining stars down there, and do I have another limited set of spaces where they can go. First thing I'm seeing is down in this 3rd through 5th row from the bottom. I can get 2 stars maximum over on this side in these vertices. And if I do that, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm always going to have to take a 6th star in this space in yellow. So I've got 1 star down here, 1 star over here, and the last star will be up top in this space. And everything else in this E shape is going to have to be canceled. So we'll go ahead and do that. That is fairly limiting. It also looks like there's a constraint along this upper right to lower right diagonal. So if I look across these diagonals, that would be sort of these spaces. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stars marked. I need to have a 5th and a 6th in yellow. So actually these are too far away to get used. And so I can further eliminate through diagonals the set of colors I use to be down here. And so again, like, don't need to do all this thinking, but just trying to give you a set of the ways of thinking about regions together and directions together that really are powerful in this star battle. This actually looks like it's going to set up some things just off that diagonal. So I was looking at diagonal starting from here. Let's look at the diagonal starts from this cell. Coming down here, I only have 2 cells left to put a star into, so I have to use those for sure. And that's going to be pretty constraining. It's going to mark the forced bottom cell. It's going to put the star up 1. It's going to mark this off, and actually this whole row is now complete. So it's going to put a star here, which is going to mean this is complete. It's going to mean we have to put a star here to get the valid count for this whole space. That finishes this region, puts a star in here, cancels that cell. And that looks like one of the set of things to do. We had just put in stars on this diagonal, so if we look at the next diagonal over, we have only these 5 cells in white for the stars to go into, but that's going to complete out that region, so the rest can't be used. Continuing in that way, or actually I'm going to shift back to this diagonal, lower right to upper left. We need to get a star up here. So these cells can't be used. Coming to this diagonal, one over from that, I've got 1 and 2 cells left that can take stars, so they both have to take stars. Marking those in, I have the last star in this diagonal, so this space down here has to move to the left, which moves this star to the left, which moves this star to the left. Those now are going to complete some of these diagonals coming up, so it completes this one, so I need to move a star here, that completes this one, moves a star there, that completes this row coming across. I've got 1 star that's going to be in this space, but this H only has 2 spaces for stars left, so it's got to be these. That means this region has to put stars in these cells. Moves this star up, that clears this diagonal, puts in this, that clears this row, puts in this, clears this row, and we've got 1 last star to place, and we're through the puzzle. So hopefully you've got a sense for this video of the different ways to look at the grid, both about sets of regions together, things like the top 2 rows, these left rows on the diagonal, sort of where you get leftover stars, or force constraints of 2 stars in these big spaces. These kind of big ways regions work together are always key in star battle, but they work particularly well in this hexagonal example. But by the time we were in the mid-game, I was really looking along these other sweeping diagonals for where are we going to get enough star counts, and we'd get a case like a diagonal like this that only had 2 cells left in it after we'd done the count and saw, for instance, the E shape couldn't take any stars in this diagonal, so we had to have a star up here and a star up here, which had to be in these 2 spaces. So all those different ways of scanning the grid added together to how to break through the Saturday puzzle, and if you're able to shift your vision enough, you probably had a good time of it. If not, this could be quite tricky. The counts of these regions are not a typical step, so hopefully you got something through this video, and we'll see you again soon.